To our webinar, Buying New Devices, What Parents Need to Know. Today we will have Tammi Sisk and Bethany Deemers presenting. We will have all audio and video muted for participants. However, you are welcome to write any questions that you have as you have them in the chat, and there will be a time for a Q&A at the end. We will be tracking those and addressing what we can, including those from the registration. And any that we don't have an opportunity to get to, we will be pointing you in the direction of some folks who will be able to help answer those. So just briefly, we do ask that you keep any questions confidential, not naming any people or schools. And it helps to have questions that might apply to others, as we do have the opportunity to offer consultations for those who have more individual questions. And just briefly, Tammi Sisk has been an employee in FCPS for 26 years, and she's currently an instructional technology specialist in the pre-K 12 curriculum and instruction office. She has a bachelor's degree in elementary and middle school education from the University of Pittsburgh and a master's degree in educational technology from George Mason University. She's been leading the digital citizenship work in FCPS for the past 5 years. During this time, many schools have earned their Common Sense School recognition, and 116 probably plus instructional employees have earned Common Sense Educator recognition. She collaborates regularly with the school psychology, counseling, and social work offices, as well as health and PE and behavioral intervention services. She also works with many reputable organizations to provide high-impact digital citizenship resources and lessons for teachers, students, and families. So thank you, Tammi, for being willing to bring some of that expertise today. And then Bethany Deemers is the mental wellness specialist for FCPS. In her role, she coordinates initiatives and programs to support student wellness and mental health across the county. She collaborates with school counselors, psychologists, and social workers to ensure that all students have access to wellness initiatives in their buildings. Prior to supporting this role, Bethany served as a school psychologist in FCPS. So thank you, Bethany and Tammi. I'm going to turn it over to you for today's presentation. Thank you all for joining us as well.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for spending a little bit of your time today with Bethany and I. We're really excited to bring this information to you. And we also know that the holiday season is upon us, and many of you may be considering purchases for your children. And we wanted to make sure that we gave you some wonderful resources that you can tap into, and some things that you can think about in advance, since we do have a couple of weeks before those holiday purchases will be in the hands of your children. So to get started, what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about today's landscape of technology. And it's going to start a little bit on a sobering note, but I think it's really important for us to tap into the reality of what our students are facing in the online space. So Common Sense Media is one of the organizations that I work with. They do an awful lot of research in relation to technology use by children. And one of the things that was very alarming to me when I was reading the research is that children are facing an increased exposure to hate speech on social media. And that hate speech takes many forms. It can be in the form of racism, sexism, homophobic slurs, and bullying. And that has tremendous impact, which Bethany is going to get into a little bit more when we talk a little bit about the mental health impacts. A lot about how Facebook had conducted research into Instagram, and how Instagram has been harmful to especially females in terms of their body image and living up to unrealistic expectations. And then we've got algorithms, and algorithms are ways that we use computers to make decisions on what we see and experience in the online space. These are kind of invisible to us. And the truth is, algorithms are designed by people, and depending on the data sets that they use to create them, they may feed us content that is also racist and sexist. And these are things that are really difficult to understand because we can't see them. And then lastly, just bringing it back here a little bit more locally to Fairfax County. There are lots and lots of challenges online that our kids are interested in, and they are of varying degrees of healthiness and dangerousness. But most recently, we had the Devious Looks Challenge, where kids were challenged to destroy school property. And we did have destruction of property in many of our FCPS schools. So this here is just one of many messages that went out from many school principals to let families know we really need your help in working with monitoring and helping our kids to learn how to be healthy users of technology, safe users of technology, and make good decisions. So I wanted to start just, again, with a little discussion about the current landscape to set the tone for today. So in today's session, we're going to have 4 parts to it. Bethany is going to talk you through the developmental factors that you should consider as you're thinking about what your children are using and the media that they're experiencing online. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about some proactive things you can do to grow your circle of influence with your children. Bethany will talk a little bit about how to respond to challenges with technology. And then we're going to close with some optimistic stories about children and technology use. So to begin with, I'm going to turn it over to Bethany, and she is going to talk a little bit about developmental factors.
Morning, everyone. So happy to be here. So we're going to start by looking at the guidelines that have been set by the American Pediatrics. So a few things I want to emphasize is that for children under 5, the research is very clear that they should not have extensive exposure to screens. So for children ages 2 to 5 years old, the most important part is using media with your child. So side by side, viewing any material together. That includes watching shows, playing different games, or using different services online. As our children get older, the time on the screen is actually less of a factor. However, the content that they're exposed to is what we should be mindful of. So the type of technology that is beneficial to children focuses on resources for learning, ways to communicate in a healthy manner, and tools to be able to collaborate with their peers. We know, especially during the pandemic, that the ability to interact and engage online with friends and family was extremely important. Parents need to be intentional about the access that they're allowing their children to when they're viewing screens. All screen time is not created equally. Parents know their children best, and when determining how much time is right for your child, especially time for screen-based entertainment, we should pay attention to how they react to the time that they're spending online in various platforms and what they're engaging with. Children may have different needs, and we want to be responsive to that. We know that every child is different. So when we start talking about childhood and some of those developmental considerations, there's a few things that we'll touch on today. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about how screens can impact our interactions with others. We want our children to be able to interact socially when they are in person. And so think about when you're out in public, or when you're in the grocery store or at a restaurant, and the kinds of interactions your child is engaged in. are we talking about the foods that are on the menu and what ingredients we might think need to be put into those, and really fostering that language development? Or is your child staring at a screen, really reducing that interaction? Social reciprocity is so important. It's how we learn those skills for interacting on a daily basis. And it starts out with play when we're younger. It turns into group work as kids get older. And then those are skills necessary to have jobs and be able to interact with our colleagues. So when you're in those places, restaurants, grocery store, driving in the car, it's such a great time to be having conversations with our kids. So I, instead of having that screen in front of them, you're fostering that language development by having conversations. Children learn language by engaging with us. And so when they're engrossed in technology use, that's one-way communication. They're listening, but they're not really being forced to interact and use language themselves. So it's really important to establish those healthy boundaries. And I know Tammy's going to touch on that later. And then developing coping strategies. For coping strategies, we're talking about the ability to deal with uncomfortable feelings. Boredom is a prime example of an uncomfortable feeling. So when we're home on the weekends and your child isn't sure what to do, when they have the option of using a screen or playing a video game, that will quickly grab their attention. But when we use that as their outlet, kids aren't able to learn how to be creative and independent and imaginative and figure out what to do and how to play with the different toys in their environment that they have access to. And so sometimes it's hard, and there's a time and place for screen time on the weekends, but really trying to, again, set those boundaries with the time so that your child can learn that independence and how to engage on their own. Sometimes it's also a means of avoiding other feelings like anxiety. So if we're nervous, we might turn to our screens, and it can turn into a negative coping skill. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. Every time a child is given an iPad or a tablet to keep them occupied, there's a cost and a potential benefit. We want to be thoughtful that we're developing patterns of behavior with technology that are healthy and do not interfere with our child's wellness. It's important to consider the purpose of the use of technology and assess the benefits and the costs in allowing them to do so. So again, you're going to hear both Tammi and I say repeatedly, it's all about balance. When we look at developmental considerations for adolescents, and as our youth get a little bit older, we are looking at some of those impacts that can impact sleep. We know especially youth who have those access to screens in their bedroom are kept up at night. I worked at a high school for 8 years, and I reflect on students who, well, I couldn't fall asleep because my phone kept buzzing. I kept getting messages. And so that can keep them up, or just staring at the screen and scrolling can keep people up for a long time, our youth up for a long time. We want to think about learning. Your learning is impacted when you're tired or when you're distracted by a device. And so it can impact our ability to take in new information in the classroom, or when we're at home doing work. I know as an adult, I have to also be mindful of putting my cell phone in a place where I don't have access when I'm trying to meet a deadline or get work done, because it can distract me from what needs to be done. We also know that the more time youth are spending on screens, there's a likelihood that their engagement in physical activity is reduced. And so this can lead to obesity and other physical health impacts. So we also want to be mindful of that. And then finally, social isolation. So just like technology can bring us closer together, and especially the past 2 years, it's allowed us to engage with others when we might not have been able to see some of our friends or family. It can also interfere with our engagement in extracurricular activities, sports, volunteering, other things in the community where it does involve that face-to-face engagement and social reciprocity. So it can really lead to being isolated, which can lead to other mental health concerns later on in life. When we're talking about our adolescents, thinking about kind of the teenage brain is so important. So first of all, our brains aren't finished developing until around the age of 25. And so expecting young people to have the ability to control and monitor their own use and duration of screen time is a very high expectation. And that's where families and parents are so important, because we can help support youth in making healthy habits with screen time. We look at the brain, and the prefrontal cortex helps us with making good decisions. Since that's not done growing, think about that as the conductor of your brain. It helps us direct all of our decision making. And so when this isn't developed fully, your teen or child might be making poor decisions related to what they post or share online, or the types of activities they're engaging in online. And that's not all their fault. We have to teach them the appropriate use. And again, Tammi is going to review some of those strategies. And for tweens and teens, they're using a different part of their brain. And that different part of the brain isn't as good at thinking through consequences of their actions. So we have to be mindful of how youth are processing information that's coming at them so quickly through screens. Teens and adolescents also see situations as being final and forever. So for example, if somebody makes a cruel comment and then somebody else agrees and chimes in, it might feel like that's truth. And they may take that information very personally, which can be very damaging to our self-esteem. But that is just the nature of how teens process different things in their environment. They're also in the process of developing the ability to see different perspectives. And it's a huge that we learn. But with the increased focus on peer approval, it also means that teens can be preoccupied with what others think about them. Social media can play into our insecurities and can really, again, be harmful to our youth's mental health as they're processing different social media images and messages. And Tammi, you're doing a great job on scrolling through the slides, so thank you for helping with that. Some overall considerations as we're thinking about youth and how it can impact development. So screen time behaviors are habit forming, and think of yourself as an adult. It's much harder to change our habits the older we get. And so when you're thinking about your child, helping them develop those healthy habits early on can be so beneficial, because they're learning those healthy screen time behaviors. The other piece is that because as youth get older, screen time tends to increase over time. That's where we talk about being mindful of knowing what the content is that your child is viewing and knowing how they're using screens. Again, Tammi's going to touch on how we can support those good decisions moving forward. And then the last thing is, I said it already, but not all screen time is created equally. So there are types of screen time that are high quality and beneficial to students. And so the first thing that pops into my mind that when I talk about that is that during the pandemic, Were kids learning online? Absolutely. But when they're engaged in instructional time, that's very different than scrolling through social media for hours. Those are two different types of media use. We also want to be very mindful of thinking about the content that youth are exposed to. So access to internet without parental controls means students could be exposed to violence, upsetting news stories, drug use and drug paraphernalia, pornography. And this has been a point of concern that has been brought up by many parents. Human trafficking or online predators, and trolls. You might have heard that term. Those are online bullies or people who like to instigate strong emotional responses. They're kind of out there just to see how people react and respond to their negative comments, and that can be very damaging. Today, many of the games and services that kids use include chat. For example, Snapchat is an application where kids can chat and then their words and pictures disappear after it's read. Discord is another popular voice and text chat service for gamers, and it can be fun and engaging, but also has potential for children to be in chat rooms with people that they don't know who may be discussing very mature content. The more that our youth are online unsupervised or without parental controls, the greater the chance that these things may be experienced. Youth need trusted adults to help them set these boundaries and manage how they're using the screens in general. We need to help them find positive ways to deal with challenges as they arise. So what we're going to talk about in this next section is how you can learn about different websites and applications and apps. And I know Tammi is going to go into this. You are going to learn so much. I learn from her every time I'm engaged in these conversations. So Tammi is going to support us in talking about how to set some of these boundaries and controls.
Okay, thanks, Bethany, so much for all of that wonderful information about some of the developmental factors that impact children's technology use. So after listening to Bethany, I try to put myself in the shoes of the participants that are here with us today. And some of you may be saying, yes, I was aware of all that. And I think I'm doing the right things. And then others of you may have learned something that you hadn't considered before. And you're feeling a little discouraged as a parent, like wishing you had made different choices. So I wanted to share a C.S. Lewis quote with you because I think it's really encouraging. It's very hopeful. Like we can't go back and change things and decisions that we've done in the past, right? We can't go back and change that. But we all have the ability to start where we are today and change the ending. And I pulled Stephen Covey's Circle of Influence as an image here because I think it really represents our opportunities as parents in the online space. We have a massive circle of concern when we think about all the different things that the internet brings to our kids. There's so many wonderful opportunities, and there's so many things to be worried and concerned about. And so what we want to do is grow our circle of influence with our kids as much as we possibly can. So we're getting rid of some of those concerns. And parents, you are the most influential people in your kids' lives. We know that you know that. School teachers are very influential as well. But parents, you are it. You are the most important people to your children. And so let's work together to grow that circle of influence. And I hope that I can share some really good strategies with you to help you do that. So before you decide whether to use a new service or a new tool or allow your child to watch a new series on Netflix or another streaming service, there's three things that I really want you to think about doing. Like first, check the ratings. I mean, ratings are written by people who do have a background in child development. And so their thoughts and opinions can be really valuable. Doesn't mean you have to agree with them, but they can certainly be valuable. And we have a lot of resources that can help you with that. Common Sense Media offers reviews for movies, games, apps, online services, and social media, and books. And they're a wonderful place to go and learn about what your child might want to use. And then the Entertainment Software Ratings Board, it also provides more specific information for games. So that's known as the ESRB there on the screen. And then we also are providing a website that really talks with you about what questions should you be looking to answer when you're reading these reviews. So the first link there under check ratings, choosing wisely what to consider, we have a whole list of questions for you. And I invite you to revisit this and take a look at those questions. I think they'll be very helpful to you. You might notice in the upper right or upper left corner, we do have a QR code. You can take your phone if you have it nearby and scan that QR code. But I also know that the Parent Resource Center will be publishing this on their website too. So every link that I talk about, you can access from the website that's on that QR code. Secondly is to make a plan. Kids can't follow your expectations unless they understand your expectations. And so it's really important to sit down, and if you want your children to listen, one thing that we know as teachers is we have to ask them what they are interested in, what they think. That opens the door to communication. So start your conversation about expectations by asking what's important to them. What are they interested in doing? And then can you discover a pathway together to getting them to where they want to be? So for instance, if you have a young child, they might really be interested in starting to use Minecraft. And Minecraft is a wonderful tool. It supports creativity, it supports critical thinking, and there's the potential for them to be in spaces with people they don't know. And so that's a time where you really want to talk with your child about the benefits and the things that you're concerned about as a parent. And so in order to get to that place where we can use Minecraft, we're going to have to sit down together and we're going to have to, talk about the things that I'm concerned about. And we're going to choose some parental controls based on your age. That way you're working with your child, you're helping them to understand why you're doing what you're doing. And it gives you a chance to really talk with them about your expectations. But at the same time, their wishes are being worked towards. And that really buys parents a lot of connection with their kids. So definitely consider that. We have 3 different resources here that can support you in setting expectations. And those will also be up on that website with the QR code. And then when we talk about parental controls, there's all different kinds of things that you can do, depending on which parental controls you're using. You can filter certain content, you can, block certain websites. Others let you control spending, set time limits. Sometimes you might want to see what your kids are doing to learn about their interests. Others let you track location. And there are on-off switches for a lot of these inside of the products that we use. So I mentioned them because I wanted you to understand the plethora of things that you can do with your parental controls. Now, I wish I could tell you that parental controls are easy. I think they're getting better as companies begin to learn more about the needs of parents. But unfortunately, they're still not super easy to navigate. What I wanted to share kind of in this slide, there's no way we could teach you every parental control. There's just too many places to go, and everybody uses different devices, products, and services. But what I do want you to know is that your internet service providers like Verizon, Cox, and Comcast, they provide some parental controls at the router level in your home. And then secondly, if your child has a phone, whether it's an Android phone or an Apple phone, There are controls that are built into the phone that you can use. If you have different gaming systems, those systems come with controls. The browser your child uses, whether it's Chrome or Bing or Firefox, there are some controls built into browsers that you can turn on. And then lastly, when you're thinking about streaming video, obviously there are parental controls there. And this is where, you know, I definitely get it. Like, it is so much for parents to think about. And that's why I'm here today to tell you, think about it on the front end, turn it on, like decide what you want to do on the front end, because to reel that back after your kids have had open access is very difficult. It sets up a lot more power struggles and things like that in the home. So definitely be thinking about that. The link that you see there on the screen is going to take you to a place where we have collected the instructions from all of these companies and internet service providers so that you can get straight to their pages for parental control instructions. That's the best we can do because, like I said, there's just so many and we can't really, you know, everybody uses something different. So we're providing the instructions in a digital format for you. The next thing I want to talk a little bit about is 9 ways that you can work in your family to make your technology use healthier. And so the first one we've kind of talked about a little bit already, where you got to anticipate challenges. You know, as Bethany said, our kids' brains are not fully developed yet, so we can't expect them to be able to self-manage their behavior, their time, their interactions with others. Those are things we have to actively teach them throughout their life. You know, it's not a one and done, sit down, have one conversation, it's ongoing. So anticipate, you know, your child, what do they have trouble with? And sit down and try to really head some of those problems off at the forefront. And then secondly, I like to think to share like a term that I learned in a different parent resource center webinar, where the internet is really like a super peer, right? They're going to learn and in some ways have pressure in the online space from the media and the people that they interact with. And so we want to make that peer pressure as positive as possible. So keep it educational, because kids learn something from all media they encounter, both positive and negative. And it's not like when you watch something that, you know, may not be healthy, it's not like it can't be positive. We can learn from non-examples. But again, that takes intentional parenting to sit down and like ask them, like, why do you think that character in the show solved the problem the way they did? And how would you have done it? You know, what might they have done differently? So we can learn from good and bad examples of media, but we have to be intentional about it. And then lastly, or the third way is to make sure that the technology, when we get online, make sure you have a goal and a purpose. When your child asks for online time, say, sure, but what are you going to do? Wait for them to name it. And then secondly, how much time do you have to devote to this today, so that you can get your homework done, make it to practice, have time to play, practice your piano. Like, we really have to work on a daily basis with our kids to give them a check on how much time do you really have to spend in entertainment and socialization online. So be really goal directed and intentional in that use, and ask them those questions on the forefront. The next set is 4, 5, and 6, where we talk a little bit again about balance. You know, screen time has an impact on health, just like your nutrition and eating good, healthy foods, getting enough sleep. And I think all parents know that, because that's certainly been something that's been communicated, not only from us, but online, on the news, etc. So balance really matters. Another thing that you want to consider as your kids are using devices is that creation and collaboration is preferable. When we're using technology or screens in a passive way, like watching television, YouTube videos, Netflix, etc., when we're scrolling passively through our social media just to see what's happening, that's where we have a tendency to get sucked in and spend way too much time online. And many of the services build in features to keep us there as long as possible. So a couple of examples would be like the autoplay that's built into YouTube. Turn that off if you can when your kids are using YouTube, so it's not just feeding video after video after video. I know I watch Netflix and am absolutely guilty of watching my favorite show on Netflix. And then at the end it says, do you want to watch the next episode? And then it'll even like autoplay it if I don't say no. And there have been many times I've watched way more episodes than I had wanted to. So we really want to, again, favor that creation and collaboration versus that passive use. And then lastly, using high quality media. How do you know if something's high quality? Well, does it match your family's values? What are they learning from it? Some examples, if you want to see some really great high quality media, check out like PBS content. They have really wonderful programming for kids that it helps them academically. It can help them social emotionally. So definitely be thinking like, what is it that I want my child to be exposed to, and lean towards that healthy, high quality media. Number 7 is to create routines, and routines, as we know, turn into habits in life. So the sooner you establish routines in your child's life and stick with them, the greater the chance that they will develop those habits and keep them as adults. So there's 3 that I want to mention specifically, and Bethany touched on some of these. The first one is to charge your phone outside of the bedroom. You can get your kid an alarm clock, but that phone just having it present on their bedside table reduces sleep, whether they look at it or not. There's been research on that. And so charge it in a space that's away from the bedroom. Secondly, really, many people like to lay in bed and watch television, but I encourage you to have your kids turn off all screens at least an hour to give the brain that time to get into sleep mode. We know that blue light does impact our brain's ability to get rested and in a place where you can have a good night's rest. And then lastly, dinner time. Dinner time is probably one of the best times of the day to make connections as a family. So having devices of any kind at the dinner table will serve as a distraction and lead to disconnection. So dinner time, bedtime, and where to charge your phone. Those are 3 examples of routines that can really make a difference in your child's life. Number 8 is to be consistent with expectations. And our lives are so busy, it's really difficult to, have that consistency, but as much as we possibly can, once you've made agreements with your child and they understand your expectations, we really have to be consistent in upholding them, even when it's inconvenient to us. When we don't follow through, then they really become a lot less meaningful to our kids. So they need to know what to expect, and they need to know what to expect if they don't follow the rules. And then we have to follow through. And then lastly, the best thing we can do as parents, even beyond using parental controls and establishing routines, the most influential thing you can do is to use technology with your child. This is a time where you can bond together, you can laugh together, you can compete, you can compete in games and learn about your child's interests. And I really encourage you to make that time on screens count by using it with your child. This is the time where you can really see how they think. You can get to know their interests. You can teach them how to think. And I mean, strategy games especially are super fun to play with your child. You really get a good insight into their thought processes, and it gives you a chance to ask them really good questions that help them think even deeper about the choices they're making in those strategy games. So those are 9 ways that we can work to make our technology use a little bit healthier. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Bethany, and she's going to talk with you a little bit about how to respond to challenges as they arise.
Thank you, Tammy. So Tammy did a really great job talking about how we can prevent potential misuse or overuse of technology. But let's talk about a few of the potential impacts and then things that can be done to support your child, or things that you should be looking for as well. Let's start with just talking about sleep disruption one more time, because our sleep really impacts our health, both mental and physical. So youth who have self-report using social media for more than 2 hours daily are more likely to rate their mental health as fair or poor. So it can absolutely have that impact. Excessive social media use is also tied to disrupted and delayed sleep. Evidence shows that sleeping problems contribute to adverse mental health effects such as depression and memory loss. And a very recent study, and I know Tammy touched on this briefly, from 2021 confirms that while social media use had a minimal impact on boys' risk of suicide, girls who use social media for at least 2 hours each day from the age of 13 had a much higher clinical risk of suicide as adults. So that impact is very long-standing, even when you're an 8th grader and kind of start to utilize social media excessively. It can also trigger mental health challenges as a result of that cyberbullying. And I know Tammy touched on the exposure to hate speech. Social media provides users with the opportunity to start or spread rumors and use negative words toward others. And those can take a very serious toll on youth. A few other things, we see that increased presence of ADHD behaviors, or that expectation for immediate gratification when our brains are constantly being stimulated by screens, whether it's through video games or television or social media. We kind of expect that constant stimulation. So it is harder to focus when we're listening to someone talk or listening to a lesson in class. I also put on here FOMO, or the fear of missing out. Students and youth often see social media, right? And on social media, we typically present our best selves. So we present all the good things and fun things that we're doing. And when a youth sees that they are not included in something, that can be very damaging. They might have that fear of missing out in the sense that they weren't included or invited to something. And so that can lead to youth feeling like they're the only person that is not out on a Friday, or the only person that's not out partying with friends. We've talked about fewer opportunities to learn social emotional interactions, and then body image issues. If you've used any form of social media at this point, everything has filters, even our Zoom meeting right now, and I'm guilty of it. I can go on here and click on a filter so that the lighting looks a little bit better. And so that can really be internalized and create some body image issues for youth and teens. And then finally, we talked about this up front, there are disciplinary consequences. So whether someone is sharing videos or photos of naked peers, that could be a problem. Some of these TikTok challenges have resulted in suspensions or larger disciplinary consequences. And again, We have to recognize that youth might make these decisions without really thinking through what might happen if they engage in this challenge. And so helping them understand that there may be consequences when they engage in some of those activities. So, we hear the term technology addiction. Technology addiction is not a recognized addiction in the DSM, but there is something called a gaming disorder. It is recognized in the ICD-11, which is it's a little bit different than addiction. What we can talk about is what that might look like. So your child may be addicted to technology if their isolation if they're very isolated. If you're noticing compulsive use, they can't set that phone down, they can't stop playing a video game. They may be sneaking around or lying about their use and kind of hiding what they're doing online. Or they become aggressive when you do try to set boundaries. And so that is, I'm going to recognize that is a little bit more difficult as you have a 16-year-old who may have those unhealthy behaviors associated with their habits around screen time. And so it's a little bit harder to backtrack. And you might see that aggression come out when you're trying to now reinforce some boundaries. And that's okay. You can do that. You can move forward with a lot of the strategies that Tammi had shared. Just recognize that the behavior or the anger associated with putting in place some rules and expectations and boundaries, you might see an increase in anger or frustration from your child before it starts to improve. It might take some time. Social media can lead to anxiety. So how can caregivers really provide support with this? We have to be very mindful as families to listen to our youth as they talk through what they may have seen online. It's hard because we don't understand what life, most of us did not grow up as young people with access to social media. We have to try our best to listen when our children are sharing their experiences so that we can try to gain an understanding of where they're coming from. Try not to judge, because the moment you judge and step in with that, well, why would that person post that anyway? Your child might shut down and feel like they can't continue to tell you what they're seeing online. As parents, you can really encourage those offline activities. We know that by engaging in volunteering or extracurricular activities, engaging with others, that we build protective factors in our kids, and they develop healthier coping skills when they are engaged in those activities. Ask questions. Ask your child questions about what they're seeing online, and ask what they're doing online. We talked about being aware of what is happening when they're in front of a screen, and that is okay. That is your job as a parent, to ask what they're seeing and why they might be anxious or why they might be upset about what they've seen online. Be transparent and be consistent. And Tammi touched on those things quite a bit, so I'm not going to dive into that too much, but I think being consistent with your rules and expectations and making that plan together as a child or a teen, making that plan of what that will look like if there is, like, if your child gets in trouble for something they've done with their phone or with their screen time privileges, then talking them through, making sure they're aware of what the consequences would be for that misuse, and then how they can earn kind of that time back or earn their device back. So having that plan in advance prior to them having a disciplinary issue with technology can be really helpful, because then it's already established and you're not getting into that power struggle later on. So one thing as parents, it can be very scary to know that maybe your child has been exposed to something that might cause alarm. And I'm going to talk about a few ways that if your child comes to you and says that they saw somebody post something and you don't know their parents, so you can't reach out directly to their caregivers, we have a few options to support your child in responding. So Fairfax County Public Schools has an anonymous tip line. You can go online. You can text 888-777, keyword tip FCPS, or you can call 571-423-2020. These reports go directly to the police, and I can verify that they are completely anonymous if you wish for your tip to be anonymous. But for example, if your child says, I saw on Snapchat that somebody had drugs at school, you could report this to the anonymous tip line and share the school information, and we can address it and ensure safety. Another thing is that sometimes youth will post that they are maybe having thoughts of suicide. And if that is the case and you don't know this person's family, you can report this immediately, and there will be an immediate response to provide a wellness check to that student. So this is a very, very valuable tool. The one other situation that you might think about using this is if somebody has posted a threat that to hurt somebody else, you can also contact this tip line, and students are able to do that too. So just a great tool and something to have in your back pocket. Then when we're talking about seeking additional help, because every child is different and we know every situation is very unique. Tammi and I will probably not have time to talk about every specific situation that there might be questions about today, but I want you to know about some of the school supports. So in addition to the SBIT at the school that can provide support around technology use, there are also mental health professionals in every school building. So every school has counselors, psychologists, and social workers that if you are worried about how technology is impacting behavior or mental health, you can contact the school and ask to speak to one of those people. You can also address your concerns with your pediatrician. Outside providers that provide therapy or counseling are also good resources. And if you're not really sure how to navigate that, trust me, I know it is challenging. Those school-based clinicians can help you navigate your insurance or no insurance and how to get additional mental health support for your child. And then there's also emergency services, and this green box here has different emergency services options if you're worried about an immediate crisis situation for your child. So one of my favorite things is crisis text. So you can need help to 85511. Not only do they support youth in crisis or adults in crisis, they are a great resource for parents. So if you are just not sure what to do and your child is experiencing some mental health challenges, you can contact the crisis text or crisis link hotline, and they have counselors that will walk you through like how to have conversations about mental health or other resources in your community as well. So they are a great option. That will lead us to kind of closing this out. So I'm going to turn it over to Tammi one more time, and take it away, Tammi.
So much, Bethany, for wonderful information. So I wanted to close out today with a little bit of optimism. You know, sometimes when we do webinars with parents around technology, it can feel pretty heavy. But I want you to know that our schools work so hard to ensure that our technology use is beneficial to students, that it has purpose, that children are learning valuable communication and collaboration skills, that they are learning to create and make an impact in the world. These are important skills that are needed in our future workforce. And so we are working very hard to make sure that we're using technology in a very healthy and supportive way for both academics and their social emotional growth. So I want to share with you just a couple of photos and things that you can see on Twitter. if you go on Twitter. At Poplar Tree Elementary, we have a student group that is called the PT Squad. And the Poplar Tree kids that are on the tech team do all kinds of things within the school. They make help videos for their peers on how to do things. They do public service announcements when there's challenges and ways to use technology a little bit healthier. They provide tech support in the school to learn skills around tech support. And so in this picture, you're seeing some of the fifth graders on the PT Tech Squad helping their fourth grade classmates learn how to use the green screen to prepare for a unit that they're going to be needing to use a green screen. So again, leadership skills are being developed, technology skills are being developed, communication skills are being developed here. Another example, this is a sixth grade STEAM classroom. And in the sixth grade STEAM classroom, what the kids are doing in this image is they are creating visual resources because they're building planetary resorts. They're imagining what it might be like to build on another planet. And so they're using books and technology to do research. They're sketching out blueprints. They're creating Google sites that have their plan. And then they're creating Google Slides to communicate their plan with others. We also have another example here where kids step into the role of a video game designer. Very highly engaging because we know our kids do love their video games. But what they're doing is they are creating digital characters. So these would be characters that would be inside of their game. And this particular game is about the interaction of animals and plants inside of ecosystems. So here you can see some of the students' characters that they've created. Next, we have a wonderful outdoor garden at Brookfield Elementary. And these folks, these students that you see in this picture are called the Brookfield Trekkers. And they are recording some videos to teach about their outdoor garden and how native plants are of importance in our community. And then our high schools have so many things. Gosh, I wish that I could tell you all the wonderful things that our middle and high schools are doing. But I pulled just one example here. Our Robinson High School Sports Leadership Group has a podcast that is written, recorded, and published all by students. It's wonderful. Check it out. And that's another really great example of how our kids are learning the skills that are needed in our future workforce and how we approach our use of technology in a really purposeful and goal-directed way here in Fairfax. So with that, I want to again thank you so much for your time today, for joining Bethany and I. And I think we do have some time for questions. So hopefully we can help answer some of those questions that might be lingering in your minds.
Thank you, Tammy and Bethany, and those participating live. You're welcome to continue to add your questions, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. So one question that we see a couple of people have asked in different ways is, how can you support your child when you are wanting to delay the use of technology, but they might be feeling left out by their peers, or they might be really frustrated with you or hurt that this is something you're considering. So how can we help enforce delaying while also minimizing the consequences?
You want to tackle that one first, or you want me to share some thoughts, Bethany?
I might let you start with that one, Tammy.
So that is really hard. We know that technology is such an important part of our kids' lives, and they do an awful lot of planning and socializing with their phones. I would, suggest that you know your child best. You know what they are going to struggle with. You can probably anticipate it. So if there is a way, if they're in middle school or high school, That's typically the age that we see students getting phones. If there's a way to set up that phone and your service in a way that creates the environment that you feel comfortable with, look at the parental controls, think about how much data you want to give them. Unlimited data really is not supportive of them learning how to manage. Also, unlimited access to be able to download apps that are for purchase. Again, they're not learning from that. So you want to think about, if you believe your phone is going to be a distraction at school, then maybe, yes, we can get a phone, but that phone stays home during the day. Or you want to get a phone, yes, and these are the parental controls that we are going to need to put in place until you grow a little older and we have a little more time to work with you on phones. So, you know your child best. If you really think your child isn't ready, I would work with your child to identify the goals you have for them to get ready, and then put a plan in place for them to learn the things that you need them to learn so that you feel comfortable with it. Saying no without a pathway will probably lead to a power struggle. So we want to care about what's important to our kids, because it's real. Like that is where friendships happen, but we also have to create a pathway to get there. So I hope that's helpful.
And just to chime in there, I love the advice that you're sharing, Tammy. I think one other piece is when you do decide to get a cell phone for your child, I think there is so much utility in those kind of device or agreements that you sit down with your child and you're making that plan. And as a part of that plan, you can look at your child's schedule, right? So you're in school this many hours a day. This is set aside for homework time. You have soccer practice from this time. That really only leaves like an hour left in the day for you to have access to your device. So being able to set those parameters around how much time can be spent on the device is also really helpful. Doing all of that up front so that you avoid some of the problems later on down the road.
Very helpful explanation. That ties into those who are saying, what do we do if our children feel like monitoring their phone is a violation of their trust by periodically checking in? So when we have kids who say, but this is mine, or why don't you trust me? Or how could you? My peers' parents don't do this. What might you suggest?
Want to take this one first, Bea?
Yeah, I'll start us out. Sure. Well, I'm going to start by saying I would imagine that those phones were primarily purchased, or that device or that video game system were typically purchased by the family, not by the student. So one piece is that is actually your phone, and I know that's kind of one of the hard responses there. The other piece is that you earn that privacy. And so privacy and trust grow as kids get older, and they also grow as your child earns that trust. And so that initial monitoring may lead into less monitoring as they get older if you see that they are engaging in healthy use on those devices. I do think that when it comes to comparing to someone else's parents, I know this can be easier said than done. You're not everybody else's parents. And so you have to do what's right for your family and what's right for your child. So those are some of my initial thoughts. Tammy, I don't know if you want to chime in as well.
I think when we talked about transparency and consistency, and being proactive by having these conversations on the forefront, I think one of the things, like if you're about to buy a phone for your child, be transparent from the get-go that your role as a parent is to ensure that they grow up to be healthy, successful, happy humans. And as a parent, I'm going to check your phone. Just be transparent from the get-go so that they understand it. If your child already has a phone and now you need to backtrack, I don't have magical answers, but I can say that it's not too late to do a reset. Call a family meeting, sit down and just say, here are some things that we're noticing. Here's why we're concerned and why this conversation is really important. And here's how we need to reset. And, like Bethany said, you are the owner of that phone. You are paying for that phone and you are their parent. And so if your child feels that it's not fair, listen, ask them questions, but you make the final decision. And we always do want to, be caring about what's important to our kids and why it's important. But our ultimate role is to keep them safe, healthy, and help them become a productive adult.
And sorry, I've thought of one more thing. When we are looking at why you're hoping to restrict some of the use or why you're monitoring your child's phone, I also think about looking at impact, right? So you're looking at whether their use, you can say, I've noticed that your grades have declined. I've noticed that you're not getting this done. I've seen that you're not getting enough sleep, that you're still texting till 3 a.m. And use those observable behaviors as to why you feel you should be kind of intervening and supporting them, because that helps them understand your purpose in intervening with how they're using their technology.
And along those lines, if your child says, well, the use of this phone, being able to connect with others, being able to watch what I'm watching helps soothe my anxiety. If they're expressing that this helps with their mental health, what suggestions might you have?
Sure. So again, it's about balance. So I do think there is some degree of sometimes watching something funny on YouTube or kind of just at the end of the day, taking 30 minutes and being able to be online and engage in something mindless after a long day, that I understand that. That being said, we did talk a lot about how it can be a very unhealthy coping skill. And so if your child is anxious and their only means of coping with anxiety or uncomfortable feelings is technology use, then we need to re-examine what kind of coping skills can be developed in your child. There are other things that can be much healthier: exercise, monitoring a healthy diet, engaging with other kids, pro-social behaviors. And so I am very concerned when a cell phone or video games are the only means of being able to cope with something that's a hard emotion, especially like anxiety, because that turns into avoidance and social isolation and that avoidance of interacting with other people. So if you're worried about the fact that that's the only way your child has to cope with things, I really would encourage you to reach out to the school-based mental health staff who can help you navigate resources in the community for some additional help, because there are a lot of other ways of coping with hard feelings.
I don't have anything to add. I reiterate everything Bethany said.
That's great advice. How might you help motivate these kids to reduce time spent on electronics? So I think we break this down: younger kids and older kids and teens. What can we do as parents so that they can internally be motivated to reduce their screen time?
So the American Academy of Pediatrics has a wonderful tool. And again, on that resource with the QR code, you can actually get to this tool. If we can make it concrete, it's very eye-opening. So, if you have a piece of paper, you don't want to use the digital version, draw a clock, 24 hours in a day. That's what we have every day. We know that kids need 8 to 10 hours of sleep every day. We know they're going to need time to bathe, to brush their teeth, to eat their meals, to go to school, to come home from school, the travel time. Plot that out for them. Help them really make a map of their day. And then begin to plug in the extras, like piano lessons or Girl or Boy Scouts or sports practice. Put in the amount of time they're spending on those activities. How much time do they need for homework each night? Do they want to watch some television to relax? Do they want to read a book? Do they want to go outside and have time to play with friends? Like those, when we can help them make a map of their day, it becomes really clear that spending 4 hours on social media or playing a video game is going to come at a cost of something else. And then that's where we talk with them about ensuring that we're having a balanced life where we can do all the things we want to do, but we also are doing all the things we need to do to be healthy as a person. So if we can help make it concrete, it's very helpful for kids to do more self-reflection. Bethany, do you have anything to add?
Beautifully stated.
So as far as parental controls go, if there are multiple kids with a wide age span using the same device, and given that there are all sorts of different devices and internet providers, do you have any recommendations for personalizing those parental controls per kid within the same device? For example, a laptop.
So my answer to this will be somewhat limited to based on like what I know, based on what I use. So I do invite others if you have ideas to share your knowledge as well. One thing I know is that Chromebooks work on the cloud, right? They're a cloud computer. So Google has a service called Family Link, and with Family Link, each child can be given their own Chrome profile on the device, which means you then have the ability to set parental controls for each child in the home through the Family Link service. So that would be one way that you could certainly approach it. There's other things that, like, depending on the service your kid, like if it's social media, you may not set those parental controls on the actual device, but you may set the parental controls within the service itself. So if they're using Instagram, there are probably parental controls in there. So you would go into your child's account and set those parental controls. Doesn't mean they, you know, it's kind of a cat and mouse game a little bit. I hate to say that, but sometimes when we have to set the controls within the service, the kids can turn them off too. And so that's where that relationship with your child, that those conversations about safety and why you're doing what you're doing come into play. So hopefully they won't turn some of those things off. But certainly if you're using a Chromebook with Family Link, you can set up different controls for different ages of kids all on the same device because each one of them has their own login. I hope that's helpful.
Absolutely. The use of users definitely helps to navigate the different abilities. And then again, always calling your internet provider. They are amazing, walking you through the step-by-step. Even when you think you know it all, they might know something you don't. And so it's just good to be efficient and go straight to the source for any device that you're using. Now, if someone has a teenager, or we could even say a younger child who is having difficulty getting their work done, their responsibilities around home as well, what might you suggest if they're also asking for a cell phone or more screen time? Any suggestions for navigating that conflicting challenge there. What has to be done versus what's being requested with screen time.
You want to take this one first, B?
I mean, I was going to kind of reflect back on the information that we talked about. You had shared just a little bit prior to this about really looking at what time is built into the day and how much time your child has available for engaging in more screen time interaction. I would say if it is impacting the expectations at home and the expectations at school, that you really need to revamp what your agreement is with screen time, like management, because if they can't get those things done, it doesn't really seem like your child has time to devote more time to video games or cell phone use. And so you might see, though, with your expectations and consistency, that your child then is better able to manage the time that they do have so that they're getting things done, and then it maybe earn a little bit of additional time on devices. But Tammy, I'll let you chime in if you have more to that.
I would just add that, what I see most parents doing is making sure that they get their homework done before they get that entertainment time. And that can be really motivational to a child to get what they need done. And there are other kids who will absolutely rush through, very carelessly do their work so they can get to that preferred activity. And so this is where you kind of have to know your kid and work with them on that. But I want to tell you, I hear from a lot of parents, no matter what, my kid just doesn't have the ability to manage his time. And what I would say is, you are right. They are still children. Their brains are still developing. And so I know how frustrating it can get at times, especially when your child's not doing their work or they're doing it, in a haphazard manner. This is all part of their development. Helping them to be reflective on their goals and their interests and their why is really important. And there are definitely, there will be times where it's going to be a struggle to have them do, their schoolwork or their chores in a way that is their best, simply because they want to get to those preferred activities. And when that happens, I think, it's okay to say, when you do it halfway, that doesn't get you the time that you want. So having them continue to go back and redo, it's okay to do that. But I did want to acknowledge that it can be motivating, and it can also lead to them rushing through things. So just kind of keep working with them. It's going to take years to develop these good habits, because that's what childhood is all about.
And that trend of having those conversations and coming together to discuss what's working and what isn't, we've heard frequently throughout these discussions. We had another question of someone asking, how do you prevent your children from being able to interact with others in video games? For example, you mentioned that Minecraft can be a really positive outlet, but there is a risk that some options allow for interaction with others. And across the spectrum with games, what suggestions might you have for discussing when it's appropriate to play games with others, how to navigate that safely, and any suggestions you might have both for younger kids and older kids is welcome.
So this is where I definitely encourage you, again, that QR code that we shared in the presentation. And in fact, I may just pull it up here if you give me just one moment, because I want to show you some things that will be really helpful for you. So let me share my screen here. Okay, so what we did was we put together sort of a wall of resources for you. And like Minecraft was the example that you were asking about. So that's where you'd want to go, and you'd want to check out the Common Sense Media reviews and find out if whatever the game or service your child wants to use, is there the ability to communicate with people that your child doesn't know? And if the answer is yes, then the next question is, can I control that? Can I turn that off? And if you can, then certainly your child can use that game or service in a way that you feel good about. So that's where we say, do your research and find out what you can do. And then your next step is, how do I do it? How do I set that parental control? And then that third part is that conversation with your child. Yes, you can use it. This is the part we're turning off. And the reason is, and explain it. And you want to revisit those agreements on a regular basis. Your child's going to be growing, they're going to be learning, they're going to be maturing. So it's not like parental controls are set it and forget it. Parental controls should be used to give you time to work with your child, to teach them the things that they need to know to be able to move to that more independent place. And certainly, you know your child best, their readiness for that. And I also like to talk about parental controls at kind of like a rubber band. You want to start tight, right? And as they demonstrate readiness and you've had time to work with them, you can loosen it up a little bit. And then when the challenges arise, have that conversation with them and maybe tighten it back up a little bit. So it's that constant ebb and flow, because our goal is really to help them become safe and independent users of the internet who have the critical thinking skills to navigate challenges, but also get all the benefits that it provides to us. So I hope that's helpful. And again, on this Padlet, notice that it scrolls left to right. So we have links that will take you to directions for Comcast, Cox, and Verizon parental controls. We have links to Apple families, the built-in phone controls. We have information here on Google for Android phones. We have all the gaming systems and the parental controls that are available with those. There's some parental controls that you can use within your child's browser. Same thing with streaming video, like there are parental controls for Netflix, for YouTube, for Hulu, whatever it is you might be using. And then here are those resources that we talked about for setting expectations. So we've got a page that talks with you a little bit about how to do it. And then we have tools. We have the family media plan from the American Academy of Pediatrics. This is that one where it really helps you plot out a day so they can visually see how they spend their time. The Smart Talk is from the company LifeLock, and it's kind of like, it just walks you through and lets you make choices together with your child and have it kind of walks you through a conversation. And then, when you're struggling, there's some places you can go to get some generalized advice. So there's the Digital Wellness Lab has an Ask the Mediatrician page where you can look at questions that parents have asked and the response from the doctors on that website. And then there's all kinds of advice by topic on the Common Sense website. So this page is just chock full of things that we thought would be really helpful for parents to have all in one place. So bookmark this website, and then you can come back to it as you need it.
What might you recommend? Most of the questions that we receive show that our parents are aware of the dangers of too much screen time, potential dangers of interacting with others, potential dangers of not being able to interact with others in terms of being left out and whatnot. What might you recommend in terms of navigating these conversations? How much should we share with our kids about what we're trying to protect them from? How do we help empower them to be able to think critically about what are good choices and not good choices?
Tammi, take that one first, Bea?
Yeah, and then I think you can probably speak to, I think there are digital citizenship tools for kids to be able to, for you to be able to review with kids too as well. Tammy, I think you can touch on that after, but that is a very child dependent conversation. I think as youth grow older, you're able to have more discussions around some of those sensitive topics like human trafficking or pornography, exposure to those things. I think that we should start those conversations as youth are young. So the moment they have access to different screens, that you can start those conversations about safety and what we're sharing online and who we're talking to. We don't know who is on the other side of a conversation sometimes. So you can have those in developmentally appropriate ways. And as youth get older, expand on those conversations and talking about the implications of sharing different things and pictures and messages. You know your child best, so you have that understanding of what conversations they're ready and capable of having. But there is guidance for that on I'm blanking on the site. You've said it like 12 times, Tammy, so I'm going to let you take it away on the actual resources for having those conversations.
Okay. So when it comes to like upsetting topics, like books and movies can be really powerful because they're depersonalized, right? We can watch a character go through something or read about a character going through something. And because it's a book and a show, it's not as scary, I guess. And so that would be like a healthy way to use media to help your child learn. Talking about, if you're concerned about something, common sense, you can go and you can look for movies and books on particular topics. Like, if you're concerned your child isn't very empathetic, for example, you can look for books and movies that have themes of empathy within them and watch them together and use that as a springboard for conversations. And likewise, sometimes those more triggering topics, like, heaven forbid any of us find ourselves with a child who has a friend that commits suicide. That could be extremely difficult for your child to process. And being able to use media to kind of explore that with them can be really helpful. Looks like Bethany might have something she wants to add there.
And sorry, thank you, Tammy. I was going to say, if they are specific conversations such as a loss by suicide, we have resources for families and having conversations about that. We have, I'll use the example of the school shooting. There are ways, I have resources, and so do clinicians at the school, about how to talk to your child about violence and violent acts. So those are resources. If they're very incident specific, that I would encourage you to reach out to your school-based clinicians, and they can provide you with some of those things, especially around suicide. Sorry.
No, that's great. And also, I had mentioned Common Sense Media has advice by topic. You will likely find answers to many of the questions that you're asking right now in that advice by topic section. So if you're here and you're hesitant to ask us a question for whatever reason, know that you can go to those sites and look for people who have asked similar questions. So that, again, that Common Sense website, which is right here, the Common Sense Reviews, but they also have a parent section where you can get advice by topic. And I see that Bethany popped a link in the chat for you as well.
And then how about juggling screen time use in schools, the ability to use a phone, the ability to use a smartwatch, the requirement at times to use YouTube as part of the educational experience? Any suggestions you have as the last question today?
So there was a couple questions inside of that one, so hopefully I'm going to answer all of them. I'm going to start with YouTube. YouTube is, we work with Google all the time to try to help them understand our needs as educators. around YouTube. YouTube is a consumer service, like it's an ad-driven profit model. So it wasn't intended, to be used in education, and at the same time, tremendous valuable content is accessible on YouTube. Schools don't have unlimited budgets, and there is so much that is so relevant and useful and high interest and engaging for our kids on YouTube that we do want to take advantage of the benefits of it. So one thing you or your child might have noticed this year is some things are different. We asked for parent permission to provide the ability for your child to log into YouTube now. And unfortunately, it's a little confusing, but this is our current model based on what is available from YouTube to us. When your child logs into YouTube, that gives us the ability to provide stricter controls. So it's a little counterintuitive because a lot of parents are like, no, I don't want my kid to have a YouTube account. The account that they would, if they log in with their school Google account and you give them permission to do that, it doesn't mean they can create a channel. It doesn't mean that they can upload or create and publish videos. They do not have the ability to do that. But what it allows us to do is provide them the most restrictive experience in the YouTube environment. And so that was really tricky to communicate to the community because it's almost counterintuitive. So if you haven't given permission for your child to log into YouTube with their school Google account, definitely find out more information and really consider it, because we can create a more educationally focused environment when you give that permission. Bethany, or I'm sorry, Erica, can you repeat the other parts of that question too? Because that was a kind of a meaty question.
It's a lot. We're trying to fit it all in here. And then as far as navigating the use of cell phones and smartwatches at school as well.
Okay, so cell phones are at school. Those are a local school option, right? Schools make rules around cell phone use. Many individual teachers will ask students to put their phone in a pouch on the classroom door as they enter. And then there are times where that phone can be really useful. Like it's really hard to shoot a video with a laptop, right? It's difficult to kind of maneuver that. And video is very powerful as a communication tool for kids. So if within a school project, they need to shoot video, a phone might be a better tool. And if a child has a phone, that would be an educational use. And a teacher would probably say yes to that. So in terms of phones, talk with your local school about what their policy is and how teachers manage that in their classrooms. I can't really answer for every school across the board.
The one thing I will say is that teachers will not take responsibility for confiscating phones. So I know that parents have asked, can you just take my child's phone if they're not paying attention? And that's typically not something, especially at the secondary level, that instructional staff will do. That can result in a big power struggle and other challenges in school. So it's an expensive device that then has to be monitored by the teacher, and that's not always possible. So just know that expectation is not something that you can really have of the teachers.
And we all students do have access to a school provided device. So truly, there's not a reason kids need to bring their phone to school from a school standpoint. So if you don't want your child to bring their phone to school, they don't have to. They don't need it within the school day.
Thank you, ladies, so much for all of this information and the access to be able to do additional research and connecting with others. We will be sending out this recording, a copy of this presentation, including all of the links to the resources that were shared. And I want to thank you, Tammi and Bethany, again for the wealth of information, and to the parents and community members joining us or listening to this later. We do encourage you to continue to do this work, to partner with your kids, to keep them safe. And we are all here to support you. So thank you all so much. Have a great day.